Hey everyone, welcome to the most opinionated space podcast on the internet, Ad Astra.
The podcast where we talk about the intersection between space, policy, and technology.
I'm Jack, your resident space policy advocate.
And I'm Newton. I'm your guy for space technology.
So, Newton, nothing happened today, right? I've been living under a rock for the last 24 hours, and it doesn't seem like anything happened in space.
I think Justin Timberlake, had some awesome halftime show or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of that happened this week.
That sure was out of this world.
Oh, good. I found that halftime show boring. There, I said it. Anyway, SpaceX launched their Falcon Heavy rocket today.
What?
It was amazing. This is Tuesday. We're coming to you not live recorded, but we recorded at February 6th at 5:55 p.m. and we watched SpaceX launch its Falcon Heavy rocket earlier today on Tuesday at about 3:45 p.m. local time. The rocket took off seemingly without a hitch, with a full-sized car mounted atop the Falcon Heavy's second stage, such that its front was a bit higher than its rear. The second stage fired its single Merlin engine 3 times, first to place it and Tesla into space, then to demonstrate the Heavy's ability to insert satellites directly into geosynchronous Earth orbit, and then finally to thrust the Roadster into deep space. So we still don't have a ton of news on what happened to the third booster. We saw both of the first and second booster land, so but we still haven't heard as to whether or not there's a signal from that third booster. But Jack, what did you think? Did you watch it live?
I did watch it live, and it's absolutely remarkable what they're able to do. And if you look at it without the lens that we generally do on the show, why did it take them so long to just strap together 3 Falcon 9 boosters? I mean, when you really look at the the rocket equation and all the things that went into it, it was a monumental task, and SpaceX pulled it off.
I thought you just tied together 3 boosters with like string or something and watched it go up.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, I think. And the maneuvers that the boosters did to get back down to the surface and to land upright, though we don't know if the core stage, the middle stage, has made that landing or stuck the landing yet, but at least the 2 side boosters have, in what will probably be on the cover of the New York Times or Time magazine or something in the near future, of the 2 side boosters landing simultaneously in Cape Canaveral. It was amazing to watch, and it all took place over the course of really 10 minutes. It wasn't even 4 o'clock when we got confirmation that the 2 side boosters had landed. Yeah. So, it's absolutely amazing what SpaceX was able to do. And I say SpaceX because I know a lot of people attribute everything to Elon Musk, but this is really a testament to the engineering capabilities of the people and minds at SpaceX. Yeah. So, Elon, you did great in starting the company. However, the award really goes out to the engineers that made this all possible.
Right, absolutely. And for those who are kind of unfamiliar with the Falcon Heavy rocket, I think this has gained a lot of popularity, specifically because Elon decided to put his Roadster on board and actually launch it into deep space for the Falcon Heavy test. Basically, the Falcon Heavy is a heavy lift rocket that can produce up to 5.5 million pounds of thrust in its first stage, with the ability to lift up payloads of up to 141,000 pounds. That's massive. This is the most one of the most powerful rockets that we've ever built, second to I believe only the Saturn V. SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have about 9 engines, but like we said before, this is almost like 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together. The Falcon Heavy has 27 of these massive engines with massive amounts of thrust. And Elon really wanted to highlight this feat and highlight the birth of this beautiful new rocket by getting people's attention. And the best way that he could do so was actually launching what apparently is the 4th car to ever be launched into orbit, the 4th electric car. The first and last time that a car ventured beyond Earth was aboard NASA's 3 last Apollo missions to the moon. For those of you who don't know, the Lunar Roving Vehicle, better known as the LRV, helped to expand the ground that the Apollo astronauts could cover while exploring the lunar surface. That was built by Boeing and General Motors back in the early 70s, late 60s. And now, by comparison, though, the Tesla Roadster, it can go about, I want to say, 4 to 5 times as far. I believe the original LRV could only cover about 57 miles, and Elon's Roadster, if it were actually going to be driven, could cover 244 miles. Unfortunately, no one's probably going to be driving that car ever again.
Well, when Elon sends himself on the big Falcon rocket in 30 years.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he does have some like star dream that he's going to actually one day like recover his car
and be reunited with it. Well, so that's not going to be entirely impossible. I mean, everyone keeps saying that the car is being sent to Mars. It's being sent to the distance from the sun that Mars generally is, which is about 1.5 astronomical units,
right,
or 1.5 times the distance from the Earth to the sun, depending on the trajectory, basically, and what plane it's going to be on. It could intercept Mars in 200 years or 10,000 years, whatever it is, or not. There's, I think, too much at play. I was reading a little bit about this. There's too much at play here to determine where the car is going to eventually end up. But
I feel like someone's written or at least run those numbers. Someone had to have run those simulations. That's not a hard simulation to run. Don't get me wrong, it's a very light craft, but.
Yeah, but I think the problem I was reading, this was a planetary.org article by Jason Davis, was that you have at certain points in the inner solar system, but within where Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury are, that you have these almost unexpected tugs on objects from the sun, from Jupiter, from Mars, that might pull it out of orbit. And there's only so far you can run numbers, right? There's to the best of our ability, there's only so much we
take gravitational jerk into account, though. So I don't know. I would have to. I guess I'll need to read the article to understand why we wouldn't be able to calculate that. But my assumption is because the craft is too light. But I don't know. I would have to read the article.
That probably also has something major to do with it. Now, I remember doing a little bit of research into, I guess, the legality of sending a car, which, there's not much out there that forbids sending vehicles into space, right? Like, governments do it all the time. I mean, even other companies do it all the time. I mean, we had a whole X Prize where the whole goal was to get something to the moon. Granted, no one was able to do that, but there wasn't any red flags being, thrown at in the United Nations General Assembly regarding the use of drone vehicles on the lunar surface. So there isn't much in the way of international legal framework for
There's no precedence, right?
There's really no precedent here. However, there is Article 6 within the Outer Space Treaty, the 1967 document that defines basically everything about our international legal regime for space. Article 6 basically states that governments cannot interfere or permanently damage the space environment, nor can companies that call that nation home. So if SpaceX, say the Roadster hits an asteroid, and that asteroid now is on collision course with Earth, SpaceX isn't allowed to do that. That type of stuff. That's in the realm of science fiction. But what's more closer to science fact is if the Roadsters, say, the calculations they made end up being wrong, or there's something they didn't take into account, and within the next 5 to 10 years, the Roadster is going to impact the Martian surface, and because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, it wouldn't burn up in the atmosphere, and you'd have impact. Well, any microbes that are on the Tesla Roadster right now, if they make it to the Martian surface, it all but invalidates the search for life on Mars. And that's the main concern for planetary protection enthusiasts. And I know a lot of planetary protection enthusiasts who are thrilled that the Falcon Heavy launched. However, I think what this does do, and we see this with Elon Musk earlier last week, talking about his flamethrowers not being able to get them through customs, that he's almost testing the fence, testing the legal frameworks that we have in place, because the things he wants to do, whether it's with Tesla or SpaceX or the Boring Company, whatever it is that he's working on that day, right? He's testing the fence for the legality of some of these crazy ideas. And specifically for SpaceX, he's trying to see how far he can take his innovative, quote unquote, innovative company and technology and maybe carve a new name for business within the space realm. He's never said publicly that he's directly trying to compete with NASA to become the preeminent space organization on planet Earth. But he's never not said that his ultimate goal isn't to send humans to Mars. I mean, they said it in the broadcast as well, that the goal of SpaceX as an organization is to colonize more planets. And I think it's we're now in this place where, yeah, it's all fun and games that he sent this Roadster up into space. And it's amazing what Falcon Heavy was able to do, not just launch one, but also land 2, maybe 3 of its booster rockets. That there's a concern here that maybe the commercial sector of space is outgrowing the outmoded political and legal framework that we set up to contain it.
I think it is, but he's also positioning himself as the top business to provide services, right? I think that overall, beyond all the pomp and circumstance, is what Musk is really trying to do here. Yes, he has a personal goal of helping humanity get to colonizing more planets, but I think overall, I have to believe that Musk doesn't think that he's going to do that on his own or, in parallel to NASA attempting. I think what he's really trying to push for is, being able, showing that he is the biggest, baddest kid on the block. I mean, in a recent interview, he talked about the fact that, combining the fact that he has this Falcon Heavy rocket, along with the ability that he's able to recycle the rockets, and what that really does. He said that if we are successful, it's game over for other operators of heavy lift rockets. There's a quote in here that says, quote, "It's like where one aircraft company has reusable aircraft and all the other aircraft companies had aircraft that were single use, and you'd sort of parachute out at your destination and the plane would crash land somewhere." Crazy as it sounds, that's how the rocket business works. And I think that's a really brilliant, beautiful model for building a business and becoming the key player in sort of the services contract industry. I mean, he seems to want it to be such that there's no question as to who to go to, the U.S. government has to go to, or who the world governments have to go to when we finally get it together and truly plan out the deep space exploration missions.
So you're saying that Elon's a businessman at heart?
Yes, I think so. I think he does a lot of crazy things to get attention. For instance, like putting your car on there. We talked about this a little before the show started, but I mean, putting your car on there, a lot of people saw it as cheesy at first. Even I thought it was kind of cheesy at first. But I mean, that's a brilliant strategy. CNN, Time, New York Times, Washington Post would barely be writing about this thing if he didn't put his car on that craft. The question that I've been asked about for the last several weeks are, have you heard about Elon putting his car on the Falcon Heavy? From people who would have no idea otherwise that the Falcon Heavy existed. That's not saying that the Falcon Heavy is not important. That's just saying that to the general populace, they wouldn't have taken it on if there wasn't sort of this, one cheesy thing that was added to it. I mean, that it's what it takes to get the public's attention.
I would say for some of the public's attention, I would argue that CNN and New York Times and Fox News and everyone would still...
It would be a back article and not effectively front page news.
I don't think it would necessarily be like just on the ticker. I don't think it'd be on the ticker on the bottom of the screen, but I do think that there would be coverage of it because this is the second most powerful rocket ever flown. Conventional rocket, capsule, oriented rocket.
I would say there would barely be coverage. I honestly, I mean, once again, I understand the importance of this, but you know, Lisa Pathfinder just produced, you know, some significant results about gravitational waves today that were published in the Physical Journal that are massively significant to astronomy. That's not in CNN or you know, or Time magazine, right? Like,
I think it's also a little contextual too, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of what else is going on. I think in the policy realm, there's a lot more going on now regarding government shutdown, which both Newton and I think is going to happen.
It's totally going to happen. Remember this time like 2 months ago when we were talking about a government shutdown, and I was like, there's no way a party that owns...
Yeah, you were always the naysayer. You were always the naysayer, and you even almost convinced me that it wasn't going to happen. I think it's going to happen
proved
twice.
Not to listen to me. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen for a long time this time around, but that's a story for another time. Go on.
That's a politics podcast. Yeah. We're a policy podcast. Anyway, so I think that there is ultimately going to be more coverage of space in the future because of not putting a Tesla Roadster on top of a rocket, but because space is becoming more and more routine. And I think that's the ultimate goal of SpaceX and Elon Musk's companies, is that the things that he's doing are going to become the norm. And what I think is dangerous is the cult of personality that has developed around Elon that he absolutely fuels at times. I think the days of, people worshiping the industrious white man need to be over. And that we really need to be talking about these things more seriously, and with a more longer term lens looking at them. But I think ultimately SpaceX has made Casey Dreyer, friend of the show, Casey Dreyer, space policy director for the Planetary Society, tweeted out, "I feel like I'm 10 years old today." Because, and that's exactly how I felt too. And that's exactly how a lot of people felt, because it's, space has been routinized over the last 50 or so years, 60 years. And we're just getting to the point now that maybe for a while it was kind of boring. And, we joked in earlier episodes that, I guess SpaceX flew another rocket today. Whoop-de-doo, they landed the rocket, whatever. There's no excitement to it. And I think what SpaceX is injecting into the equation is new things that are happening. I mean, this heavy lift vehicle, even if there was no Tesla Roadster on top of it, and even if it blew up on the launch pad, even the attempt of doing that would create such a buzz within the space community and the connected communities alongside that I think that you would see some press coverage. Of course, the more that you stack on, if it's a successful launch, if all three stages land, if you actually get a car into trans-Martian orbit, or a sun-synchronous orbit, those types of things are like just add to the media coverage of it. But I think ultimately what SpaceX has done, and I think it's a great thing, that they have increased the profile of space, that people are now caring about space almost at the same level as they did during the height of the shuttle program. I don't think we're at Apollo yet. I don't think that we're
no.
And I think because it's an industry effort, that there's always going to be suspicion, and that there's always going to be a level of distrust, even outside of the industry, between these companies. And I certainly am a part of that. I don't necessarily trust that Elon's ultimate goal is to send humans to Mars and develop an economy. I think you're right in saying that I think he's looking to be the prime contractor for NASA and DoD and NOAA and ESA and all the other space agencies around the world. But I think that he's trying to energize people so that NASA does start doing something in regards to a Mars mission, right? That we start really taking those steps forward, because it's almost that, Elon is saying, jump, I'll be able to catch you. Because NASA, up until this point, has had maybe not the best track record. I mean, certainly 99% of launches are successful, but there's maybe a little bit of doubt that NASA's still going to be able to pull this off. And for the entirety of NASA's existence, private contractors have been the source of NASA's successes. Very rarely does NASA build their own rocket. The SLS is an anomaly in that.
Yeah.
For SpaceX to then say we have a reliable launch vehicle that's cheap, so Congress's ears are ringing, and that's going to be able to get you beyond low Earth orbit, I think that sings NASA's song. And I think we need to be welcoming and open to what SpaceX is able to do for us, but also be aware that we're starting to walk into uncharted territories and legal gray areas, that we're going to need not just the technological push into space, or the engineering push into space, or the scientific push into space, but we also need the legal and regulatory and oversight push into space, so that we're able to handle when, SpaceX's next rocket blows up and say there were 4 people on board. Like, what happens then? There's no precedent for that. I mean, NASA's had that happen to them twice. Yeah. Right? And NASA's solely accountable to the U.S. taxpayer. And after those unfortunate incidents, there was a public backlash, a host of congressional investigations, some of which spawned some of our greatest scientific communicators, see Neil deGrasse Tyson, and that they saw, even to this day, people look at Challenger and Columbia as hallmarks of why government-funded space exploration can go wrong. And I think that it's dangerous to think that the private sector is the only notable alternative. I think it's always been the private sector for space. It's just now taken on a new face, and I think that face is SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit. I think it's much bigger than just SpaceX, but SpaceX right now is paving the way for what will be a very vibrant space economy in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think there is something to be said about being so, I guess, maybe bombastic is the wrong word, but, being so loud about it. That I think is the differentiator. You don't see Lockheed Martin being this loud. You don't see Northrop Grumman being this loud. SpaceX has the social media presence and the commercial presence, and they're constantly trying to get the public's attention so that they can become the name that's synonymous with reusable rocketry and deep space flight. I think that is a big part of their campaign, that Lockheed and Northrop and all of the other major contractors that help out with rocketry and have historically helped out with space flight are lacking. And really, it kind of goes back to the old school structure of those organizations, whereas SpaceX is still a fairly new company, and it's a company that is a company of its time, and given how much attention it gets. How much tweeting did you see on Lockheed's last launch? So I think that's an important thing to sort of acknowledge, is that they know that they are very good at getting attention, and it is a very good marketing technique when effectively the public is the one that funds you, right? The public is paying taxes, and you have a very public image.
Well, here's an important point, that the taxpayers are going to be on the line for the next SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch.
Right. Yeah.
It's an Air Force satellite that's going up. Granted, there's some additional payloads like Planetary Society's LightSail 2, but the prime payload is an Air Force satellite. Granted, we don't know what it does. But
well, even some of this mission is actually a demonstration for the Air Force. So let's get into kind of where things are like right now as we speak. As I said, it's about 6:20 on Tuesday, February 6th. As far as I know, the Falcon Heavy's flight is still ongoing, and SpaceX cut off its broadcast before any more details were released. The rocket's upper stage, the portion with the actual Roadster in it, is supposed to ignite its engine about 2 more times, and that last engine burn won't happen for a little while. After the next burn, SpaceX will test out an experimental 6-hour coast, during which the upper stage and the car will cruise through space without firing the engine. That long wait is to show the Falcon Heavy's ability to do a special kind of orbit maneuver specifically for the Air Force. That's something they're actually doing for the Air Force. Shortly after the launch, Musk did send out a tweet saying that everything's normal with that upper stage. So now it's now in its coast phase. So that's kind of what's happening right now. Going forward during the coast, the car is going to pass through the Van Allen belts, it's just a region of intense radiation that surrounds the Earth. The high energy particles in the belts are going to just bombard the car and the rocket, which is going to be interesting and may teach us a lesson about what materials we put into deep space. Yes.
We'll see if the paint peels off, but yeah, they're gonna nuke it for a couple hours. And for those who maybe remember the Juno mission, or continue to remember the Juno mission to Mars, don't forget that we have that going on. There was a whole talk about it. Yeah, to Jupiter, and there was all this talk about it being able to pass between the planet's atmosphere and the radiation belts. It's the same. Any planet that has a magnetosphere tends to have a band of radiation belts around it that are trapped by that magnetosphere. Right. So, I mean, it's not like there's some weird thing going on in the upper atmosphere that's creating all this radiation or that has anything to do with SpaceX. It's just a natural phenomena that exists there.
Right, but you have to construct your rocket and the materials that you're putting up there appropriately, because the fuel could freeze and the oxygen could be vaporized in that belt, and that could inhibit the third burn, which is necessary for that trans-Mars injection that they're going to be attempting. If that final burn doesn't happen, the car could simply stay in Earth's orbit and then eventually fall to our planet, where it would probably burn up in the atmosphere. I don't know if that is certain. I mean, Elon would be in some serious trouble if, obviously if the car fell on someone or some business. But
I feel like at that size, without any proper shielding, I think the Roadster would burn up within the Earth's atmosphere. If at the very least it would break up to small enough pieces and by all likelihood hit somewhere in the ocean. So I don't think that's necessarily a major concern, but if the right conditions were in place, I don't want an irradiated Tesla Roadster heading back towards the Earth. Who knows?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I really, really want a Tesla Roadster.
I'm sure sales have skyrocketed, and I think there's still a live stream of just the Tesla Roadster, which I really hope that those cameras are being, the energy for that is being from the battery on the Tesla itself. But who knows?
So getting into the future here, before we get out of here, there's a few more missions that the rocket has a little later this year. It's scheduled to launch a large Saudi Arabian communication satellite called Arabsat 6A sometime in the first half of 2018. And it's also booked to send up a test payload for the U.S. Air Force no earlier than June as a way to certify the rocket for national security missions.
And that's the one that Planetary Society will be on.
Right. After that, I believe it's contracted to launch 2 additional communication satellites for Inmarsat and Viasat, but that's it for now. So, I mean, we had a successful launch today. Great.
We did, and it's going to be an amazing next couple years. Let's just hope that they maintain the level of engineering rigor that got them to this point with Falcon Heavy, and that we continue to have successful missions. Mm-hmm. And I know I've always been a doubter of Elon, and still will be a naysayer to a certain degree. I think there is a level of pushback that you do need, especially as you are people within the SpaceX community can be a little caught in their own echo chamber, the muskrats, as we lovingly call them. But I think this is an amazing feat, and I will be sure to purchase my Elon Musk proved me wrong shirt and wear it around DC one of these days. Maybe when it gets a little warmer out. It's in the mid 30s here in DC, so not necessarily t-shirt weather. I'm not about to catch a cold.
Yeah. Come on, I thought you were from Michigan.
That does, that just like we have to harden things against radiation, you have to harden it against the cold, regardless of what it's made of.
Well, that does it for us then. You got anything else? Any other announcements?
Nothing else for me other than be on the lookout for what is probably going to be a second government shutdown within a matter of a month. for this administration.
Yep.
So we will be coming to you pre-recorded from the Capitol wasteland as the government descends into absolute chaos next week.
We'll record every day until the batteries run out.
All right. Well, as always, I'm your host, Jack.
And I'm Newton.
Ad Astra.